And hello. We are back. The Lume Plotters. Hello, Martin. How are you?
I'm good, Ralph. How are you?
I am exceptionally well today.
Good. It's a very good topic today because today we are talking about our namesake.
Oh my God.
We will be discussing Lume plots.
The Lume plots. Okay, that's an interesting topic.
Plotting about Lume.
I think that's a very interesting topic.
It is. But first,
okay,
what are you wearing?
On my wrist today, the
Apple Watch Ultra.
Yeah. Let's not talk about that.
Ralph double wrists.
Yeah.
So he always has the Apple Watch on.
Most of the time I do, yeah.
Okay, on the proper wrist.
On the proper wrist, I have my Tissot PRX. What is it? PRX, I forgot it. Powermatic 80.
Yes.
Exactly. With the blue dial.
Yes.
Beautiful watch. I love it. It wears super nice. Has the vibes of the Rolex Oyster Quartz, right?
Yeah.
And it just makes me want the Rolex Oyster Quartz.
It does.
I love it. It's really cool. Yeah,
it is a cool watch.
It's so comfortable, and I must say, for the value for money is off the charts with this watch.
It is. It's
what you get for that amount of money. Man, this 80-hour power reserve movement doesn't have the silicium hairspring like the.
You have the plastic one. So we went into discussion.
Not plastic. It's not plastic. It's not the plastic version. This is fully serviceable. No. This Powermatic 80 version in this one is fully serviceable.
So, but the Powermatic 80s in the Tissots did have a plastic escape wheel. They called it. I didn't have this discussion with you. I had it with another friend of mine who has the same movement. Yes. So this one, the Tissots,
they have responded to that from Tissot. They said, no, this one is fully serviceable. It's absolutely
serviceable, but it's still plastic.
It can also regulate it. So,
but it is still made of plastic.
There might be some plastic parts in it, but I don't think this one is.
So it's serviceable, but they called it
No. There are versions of this, the C07 or C08 or whatever.
07 is the one with the plastic.
That do have plastic parts, but not in this one.
The C07s were put into Tissot PRXs. So the thing was, I don't know if over time they changed.
I think they also have different versions of it.
Yeah.
Right. So I think what Tissot has been asked. And it was, I think, that they said, look, no, this is not the version that we have in the entry level. They exist, non-serviceable, like the System 51 and others from the Swatch Group that are also based on these kind of developments. They are just offsprings of the 28, 24. Yep. This one is serviceable.
It's not about being serviceable versus not. It's about having still a plastic piece in it. So
I don't think so.
So we're going to, of course, Google this now. Plastic parts in the Tissot Powermatic.
Yeah, there was a big discussion on certain forums, and I think it always came out that there are not actually. So there's a lot of discussions. That was on Watch Crunch was a big discussion that had that, and I think it all came out in the end to say that Tissot came out and said no plastic in it. But yes, I understand there was a big controversy.
There was a big controversy recently about this. But anyway, ignoring this, you could check out the Watch Crunch had a video about it. Once again, we are not in the position to be. And this is, I think, saying one way or another.
In the comments underneath, there was no, it's not. Tissot also came out and made that statement. This version, no plastic part.
Yeah, but is it the same as Swatch saying the Moonwatch is not plastic? It is. Bioceramic. And I think they mentioned this. They specifically said the part is not plastic, it's bioceramic.
That I don't know.
So they were saying it's ceramic, but essentially it's plastic. So anyway, they were giving it a fancy
name. What I wanted to say is that the other one, like the Tissot Gentleman, has a silicium hairspring as well, which is even more insane for the price you get, but not in the Tissot PRX Powermatic 80. So what are you wearing?
I'm wearing my Rolex Datejust 116234. Silver dial, stainless steel with the white gold fluted bezel on the Super Jubilee bracelet. And the Super Jubilee bracelet is the one that has no visible clasp, just the crown. And my favorite thing about this, of course, is this bracelet. But the fact that the Rolex crown, which kind of hides ever so sneakily, is actually a hinge. So there is a hinge mechanism that, I don't know if you can hear it. It gives it a really good click.
Click.
Yeah, it's a very
Mm-hmm.
snappy clasp, but it's super well made. And the bracelet was what made me get the watch.
This so-called hidden clasp, right? That's what Rolex calls it, I think, the hidden clasp. They are not using this anymore in the 36 millimeters.
No.
They're only doing this in some lady Datejust.
Correct. Yeah,
and I think in the 31 millimeters, they're still doing that.
Perhaps. So I know that the 36 millimeter size does not have it anymore. Hence why I bought mine when I did.
It's very, it's sad because I really like this. And I know that, my wife, for example, she thinks that having a normal clasp is weird.
It is, I think,
because this hidden one is so much nicer.
But once again, in the president, in the day dates, you're still getting the presidential bracelet with the hidden clasp in the 36 millimeters. So it is a very weird reason why they chose to discontinue this. But I was lucky enough to pick one up in May of 2019, and it was discontinued March of 2019. So I actively was looking for this specific model as opposed to the newer variant with the clasp. With the regular clasp, I should say.
Very nice.
But of course, no micro adjust, which is kind of problematic to some people. For me, it wasn't an issue because the Jubilee bracelet is so comfortable that it just somehow hugs your wrist much better than the Oyster bracelet. And where the Oyster bracelet might have some issues with sizing, the Jubilee bracelet does not. I
do have one watch with the Oyster bracelet. That's with the Jubilee, which is my Sky Dweller. It has, obviously doesn't have this clasp. It does have the normal clasp. So it has this comfort extension if you need to.
Now, all said and done, once again, this is called the Super Jubilee bracelet. And that's the nickname that I was given because it is the beefier version of the old Jubilee bracelets. So the old Jubilee bracelets were very tinny. They also had clasps on them.
Yeah.
The Super Jubilee came out. It was solid and it was the large size, the 20 millimeter size. So the other reason people really like this bracelet is because it's able to be fit onto both the GMT and the Submariners and the Daytonas of this era. So I've done this before where I have my Submariner. I will put this bracelet on it and it just transforms the Submariner into a different watch.
I can imagine, yeah.
It's really cool.
A Submariner with a Jubilee bracelet.
Yeah.
I have seen Uncle Seiko, or now they're called Uncle Straps. They have now new titanium bracelets for the Pelagos 39.
Really?
Yeah. And one of them is a Jubilee style.
That's very
Jubilee style
titanium bracelet.
It's sold out on their website, but it says always sold out before they launch, right? So I think they set it up, and then eventually when they launch the product, then it's available. I think I'm gonna get one.
I think that would be I would love to see it.
How it looks, yeah.
I think that'd be super cool.
Anyhow, so how much Lume is on your bracelet?
I got quite a bit. Not on the bracelet itself, but the watch itself. It's actually very nice Lume, which is one of the funny things is this was my third watch in my collection. So in the modern collection, I should say, because I had a lot of things coming and going. But I had my Submariner.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I had the Speedy first, which had green Lume. And then I had the Sub.
Yeah.
And the Sub has blue Lume. And then I got the Datejust, assuming it would have the same blue Lume as the Sub, and it doesn't. It has the green Lume.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very complicated. Apparently, Rolex, and Rolex has made infinite mistakes over the past. And if you look through the forums, there are people with my exact watch, my exact reference, that have blue Lume.
Mm-hmm.
Some people got the green Lume. And there are some guys that got mixed Lume.
Really?
Hands were blue. The dial was green. So there are these stories of ridiculous things.
Interesting.
But for instance, my wife's Rolex, purple Lume for the hour markers, green Lume on the hands.
No, because that was the specific dial, right?
Correct.
Where the Lume actually has a color.
Exactly, which we'll get into colored Lume as well. So interesting things about Lume. But what about yours? How much Lume do you have?
Okay, the Tissot PRX80, this is the one of the weak spots of this watch. The Lume is blue. It's glowing blue, but it's very, very, I think to a certain extent, why even bother if you put lume that is so weak that it doesn't really
do anything,
last longer than 5 minutes, and it goes away very quickly, and it's very faint in any case, even if it's fully charged up. Yeah, it's for me a bit of this. Why?
Does
why
this
even
bother
bother?
you at all?
Not at all.
So me neither. So I do not care. Once again, I like seeing lume, but
it's nice when it's there.
Yeah.
If it's not there, I have some vintage watches where it's dead. Right, the old tritium stuff.
We'll get into this as well. But I have numerous watches. My Grand Seikos, no lume. My JLC, no lume. My Cartier, no lume.
So my wife's Rolex with the Roman numerals also.
If you have a Roman, this is another big story we can get into. Is some watches would have lume on the hand, which the idea would be you could kind of tell from the shape, where the hands are pointing. You don't need the reference points, which I think you don't know if it's upside down or not. That's kind of an issue. But if you're picking it up off the nightstand, for instance.
Yeah.
But other watches have lume on the dial and the hands.
And then you have this super cool outlier.
And the outlier ones.
The Wimbledon dial, where you have just one fat lume spot on 9 o'clock.
It makes total sense.
And then nothing else. I think that's really one of the weirdest things.
It is. So anyway, lots of different varieties of lume. So we're going to go and give you a beef.
Let's explain to us, what is lume?
That's
lume
a great question.
Yeah.
So you want to take this one? Why don't you take this one?
Okay, I don't know how far I can go, but you can please add to it. Lume is luminous material. Luminous material is something that is takes the energy or the light energy and from the sun or from other light sources and emits it afterwards.
And generally emits it slowly over a period of time. Yeah, it's an excellent definition. This is exactly what it was funny listening to you say it, because I would have used the same exact words. Right. I was going to use luminous material. Mm-hmm. I was going to use other light sources, and then emits it over time is the way I was going to say. So it's almost identical to what I was going to say. Now, the history of it is where things get very complex.
Yeah.
This started with radioactive materials. So radium was one of the first materials, paints, that was used in watchmaking to make indices glow. And of course, at the time, the women that were painting the dials, they were known as the radium girls. There is a movie about this as well, basically.
Yes, it's a very sad one. Yeah.
It is. At the time, people didn't know that radium was toxic to the levels that it is. So these women would lick the paintbrush clean and then dip it into the radium and then paint and then lick it again. And they were ingesting extreme high quantities of radium. So of course
back in the days, they didn't know that radioactivity is so harmful,
exactly,
so toxic for the human body. I saw that some of the girls would paint their fingernails with this paint because it was fun when it was glowing at the night, right? When they went out of the factory and even, and use it as kind of cosmetic on the teeth and other things, just for fun, for fun and jokes. Of course, nobody had an idea, and it was a bit covered up in the beginning that it actually could cause to serious issues. But yeah, it's a very interesting and sad story about also worker protection, I think, in the end, right? Of how this actually was.
So they ended up suing the companies, and most of the time the companies won.
Yeah, weird.
Yeah.
But there's a very interesting movie. If you want to watch that, The Radium Girls, it's a very interesting documentary, which is not boring to watch. It's very exciting.
They made a new one.
Yeah, okay.
It's not a documentary. It's a what do you call it when it's a live action, but it's historical. It's a movie. It's got that girl from
Edutainment.
It's Edutainment. It's not the greatest cool movie in terms of cinematic quality, but it's in
entertaining.
It's got good history in it.
Yeah. So radium.
Okay. So radium. So radium has a half-life, I believe, of about 1,800 years, 1,800 years, meaning that it would take generally the amount it would glow. So the glowing that it had is to this day roughly the same intensity that it would glow today, which is amazing, right? Most of the time with other Lume types. Lume dies out over time. Radium didn't do this.
Which I think is just fascinating for me. That's why nuclear power is so. I mean, we have our first nuclear power plant now.
Yeah.
In the UAE, right?
Over in Liwa, I believe, right?
Yeah.
It's out in the middle of nowhere.
And I don't know if all of these, how do you call them, reactors are already online, but I think
they're working on it.
all of them.
But I believe it's run by the Koreans.
Yeah.
So
it developed, yeah.
Yeah, developed by the Koreans and
run locally,
but the Koreans are working in conjunction with the UAE to run these nuclear power plants.
But it's pretty amazing of how much power there is in this little pieces of radioactivity that this little Lume plot made of radium can glow for thousands or hundreds of years in the same intensity.
Once again, you have to imagine. So the way half-lives work is if I tell you it's got a half-life of 1,800 years. That means it's going to glow for 1,800 years in the same intensity.
Yes.
And then for the next 1,800 years, in essence, it'll glow with half of that intensity. And then for the next 1,800 years, it'll be half of that.
Will go gradually
of course, this is
down,
gradually down. This is averages over the course of those years. But in essence, when we take the average, it glows half in each step down. Now, of course, when we found out that this was dangerous, a lot of companies disallowed it. So I know the military, the British and American military said no more radium. It was dangerous, especially in submarines and things like this. Therefore, we got Blancpain watches with the no radioactivity dials. Yeah. So the whole purpose of that was you're not taking radioactive material down into a nuclear submarine. Then the new thing that came after that was tritium, which is still technically a radioactive material, but it's a much weaker radioactive material. And generally most dials would denote that it's tritium by having a T somewhere on it. It would also mean that it's more safe than radium. And tritium has a half-life of 18 years. So in essence, it lasted in full intensity 18 years, then it went down. And nowadays, because tritium was outlawed in 1998, most companies stopped using it around 95. So if we look at that, it's probably, nearly 30 years ago. Almost 30 years ago, which means it's gone through almost 2 half-lives, which means most of this tritium lume that exists in the world today does not glow anymore.
Yeah, and if maximum, it would be like a quarter of it.
Exactly, and it might glow for a few seconds, and that was kind of it.
I can see on one of my watches, which is about 25 years old, which has a tritium dial or tritium Lume plots on the dial, that if I put a UV lamp on it, it just reflects that light. You can see that's still there, but it just glows for less than a minute. And that's it. It's usually just goes away very quickly. Yeah.
So what came after tritium?
After tritium, I think we already started with Luminova, right? Which is
a brand name, right?
Correct. It's from a Swiss company. I don't know which company though. Is the company name also Luminova?
No idea.
We don't know, but there's a company that produces that Luminova, and Super Luminova is one of their more modern versions of Luminova.
And I know they have color codes like C1 and
yes, absolutely A1, A1. They have different
colors.
Different
there's green,
intensity
there's blue,
grades.
intensities. Exactly.
The color of the glue of the lume itself, and the color of that it emits, which is funny because you can see certain watches, for example, let's say the Omega Seamaster Black. It has lume.
Black lume. The plots are itself black.
They're black, but it glows at night in green or in blue. I don't know. I think it's mostly green for black lume when it's charged up. But what it does is it's a bit less intense when it has black color, because obviously it has to also get through the blackness of coloring. Course. But yeah, it's a very interesting product, right?
It is
luminous material. But it's now completely non-radioactive.
Yes.
Even tritium was very low radioactivity. There's some watches that maybe let's talk about this for half a minute. Ball watches, and I think Luminox, they're using these little tubes, and I think they're still tritium tubes.
I think they're sealed.
Yeah.
Is it tritium? I'm not sure if it's tritium
so.
or neon gas or something like this.
Yeah. Yes, true. Maybe gas tubes or something. But they're lighting not as bright as Lume when it's fully charged, but it just lights.
Yeah, it is microgas.
Okay, but it lights up without any trigger. You don't have to expose it to light. It just constantly glows for about 25 years or something. I think they say usable time.
So once again, I'm just guessing here that it is tritium gas. You're absolutely right. So it's a tritium gas as opposed to tritium paint, and they say it lasts 10 years and needs no external light source.
Yeah. So this is basically the same thing. So it's still in use in some rare cases with, as I said, ball watches and Luminox. That's the only ones I know that still put this in. And the cool thing is you don't have to charge it.
Yeah,
it's not as bright as Superluminova if it's fully charged, but it glows all day long. Yeah, all night.
And there's different ways to apply Lume as well, and this is still evolving.
Yeah, and these tubes are, of course, it's
not
a
gimmick.
Easy because
it's a gimmick, right? It's kind of to make it look.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
but talking about Lume,
traditionally, Lume was painted on a dial.
Yeah.
Now, in recent years, we've developed basically indices, right, where we fill the Lume into an external metal kind of guide. It's almost creating a cavity, right? Mm-hmm. So in Rolex, they're using white gold to create these Lume. They're indices, but it's
it has a cavity. You just fill it up with
what's the name that the Rolex keeps saying? It'll come to me. But anyway, so basically they put a circle down and it's kind of a ring, and then they put the Lume inside that, so it's more uniform as opposed to when you're painting it, which you can kind of make the shapes slightly different, and you need more skill to paint them into a circular fashion as opposed to if you were just going to do fill. And then now Tudor has come out with Lume blocks, which is very interesting because they're saying it's a mix of ceramic and
they mix the luminous material inside some ceramic compound, and then this whole thing actually glows. Moza has done the same with the heritage watches, and one of them I have the dual time heritage dual time, which has these ceramic blocks that are filled with Luminova. The Seamaster from Omega also has this certain very shiny round Lume plots that look like white marble. They're really, when you look at them when they're not charged, they're really lovely, like covered with the shiny material. It doesn't look like Lume in the old days where it was always a rough texture and it looked like chalk, really, right? This looks really like it's probably also a mix with another material inside.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But it's super smooth. So, by the way, the word I was looking for was surrounds. Lume surrounds.
The Lume surrounds. Yeah, usually there's, for indices, right, that are silver looking, they are usually using either white gold.
Well, if it depends on who it is,
or
right?
Rhodium.
Tissot is not using, in this case, I don't think there's Lume surrounds on this one.
Mine are made of diamond.
But actually, no, we can say
joking.
This. Tudor has Lume surrounds on the Black Bay, for instance, but those are not white gold, they're stainless steel.
No, then rhodium covered usually, right?
So is it rhodium covered, rhodium plated stainless steel?
Rhodium plated.
Yeah, but it's still stainless steel ultimately.
Yeah.
So it's plated in different colors, especially if it's the Black Bay with the gilt dial, which we can talk about gilt in a second. That's generally when they're using a pink gold style coloring. We'll go into dials in a different episode. I don't want to go into the history of this now, but in essence, they can plate stainless steel with different colors. Rolex would just use the real gold, but Tudor and other
and this is just
brands would just
to keep it from corroding, because it's very corrosion resistant.
So once again, we had originally painted, then we had surrounds filled, and then we also had other types of applications. We mentioned Tudor's blocks of Lume, but one other big one is what's called the sandwich style. Panerai, Omega used to use this, as well as a few others. But essentially what they did was they would take a dial, They would paint it in luminous material, and then they would have a second layer of that dial, which had cutouts for what the indices were, and they would glue that on top of the lume. And then essentially what you would see through those holes would be the lume that was in the layer below. So it gives you a very cool three-dimensional effect. And you see this, you can see this in the Omega Seamaster 300, not the 300M, but the old traditional Heritage 300, as well as in the Panerai basic PAM models. So super cool looking three-dimensional dials.
Yeah, in the old times, they used the entire dial underneath to make it, luminous material. Yeah. Now they're skimping a bit on it, so they're using just the pieces around.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. But still cool.
Everything. Periscope had an interesting article about the sandwich dials, how it changed over time. But it's a very, very, very cool stuff. I mean, and the lume that I have. What is your watch with the best lume?
My brightest. Rolex is, of course, the Rolex sports model specifically. Rolex is using a proprietary. Of course, they have to make everything themselves these days. So they call their version of their lume, it's called Chromalight. Once again, different colors of Chromalight exist. But I've noticed the blue Chromalight on my Submariner and my Explorer one. Those are by far, 10 times what my Speedmaster or my green glowing Datejust is. So it's unbelievably bright.
For me, the brightest I have is it's not my Explorer 2, even though it's a very young Rolex. Tudor. Tudors are good. They are pretty bright, but my brightest is the Panerai radium.
Really?
Yeah, it's amazing how quickly it glows up, and the Blancpain 50 fathoms.
Okay.
I guess it's the amount, especially on the hands, because there's a lot of area, and it seems that there's a lot of layers of lume or deep, because that's also important, right? You have
how deep and how much and how wide, right?
And of course, if it comes to hands, then that depends on the movement of how heavy can the hands be.
Yeah, exactly. Because once again, lume does weigh something, right?
Correct.
Hands are generally you try to make the hands as light as possible so that you can move them around with the least amount of resistance, right? So one famous thing
on the axles and things. Yeah, exactly.
So one interesting thing is Rolex sports models are known for the Mercedes hand, the hour hand. Yes. The reason that Mercedes lines exist inside that hand is because if it was a single lume plop, they were afraid that it would fall off or break.
Yeah, and crack over time, because
however,
it's paint after all, right?
Yeah. But this is what it comes down to, is at the same time, Tudor was making the snowflake hand, which was bigger than the Rolex Mercedes hand, which they didn't have an issue with that. So it's kind of, I'm questioning how much.
Yeah, but see, I also think usually during a service, hands very often get swapped, replaced. Yeah. So if they're saying like, okay, the lume is not working anymore very well, then in the old times, they used to repaint dials very often, take off the old luminous material and put on new ones. So that was something that would have been done during service sometimes, and replace the hands with new material, or even remove the material there and just repaint them.
Yeah.
But in the end, it's just sometimes on the hands, it's not even a proper cavity. It's just a hole, right? It's a slit in the hand, and then you just put the paint over, let it dry, and then that's it. So that means that when this is exposed, when it fully dries out, it is exposed to a certain amount of NOx or heat and other things, it can eventually develop a small crack.
Yep, exactly. So
not with the most modern material, but over time it might still happen.
So and if we go back to older lume as well, the other thing that older lume did was it aged.
Yeah.
It changed colors. It became yellow or brownish in color.
Yes.
So depending on how much UV light the watch was exposed to over the course of its life.
Yeah.
And this, of course, with vintage watches is now a desirable attribute, right? You can tell the originality of an older watch. As Ralph was saying, sometimes you would have service hands, service dials. And then oftentimes these weren't done together. So if you see a watch where the hands glow brighter than the dial itself, or has not aged in the same way, most likely the hands were service hands. But now, if you find a watch that has aged equally, then that generally means that neither the hand nor the dial has been replaced, and they were both original.
Yeah, exactly. And it's sometimes you see on the dials as well, when there was the Lume plots became ungainly. They didn't look nice anymore because they became brown, and you had the silver dial or something, and they used to become a dark brown, which we call patina, right?
Now we call patina. At the time, it was disgusting.
But at the time, they thought like, ugh, and they moved during the service. They just didn't even bother replacing them. They just scraped it off.
Yeah.
So you have a blank dial then there.
Yeah.
Which these little points. It's not part of the indice, but it's behind the indice basically.
Rolex did this for a while, right? They had tiny little Lume plots. They were about 1 millimeter in diameter, and they had nothing to do with
the JLC master control date. The entry level JLC for
still
example, has this little dot.
Still to this day has it.
Yeah.
So that's
and this. I mean, nowadays, as you said, we have this, what we call Fotina.
Well, this came because this became popular in the recent years in the vintage collecting market. So therefore, certain brands decided that, hey, why don't we start coloring our dials or our patina to make it look vintage? And JLC was the first one to do this back in 2008. They were the first ones to do this on a Polaris. It was a limited edition Polaris for the 2008 Baselworld.
Yeah.
Came out, and it had yellowish lume. And of course, sometimes it looks really good with the color of the dial. Other times it might look like crap. So this is what we call Fotina or faux patina.
Yeah. I think it's a design choice. If you want to have off-white, beige lume because you think that looks nice on your watch, I don't have a problem with that. I know a lot of people saying like, "Oh, Fotina, that's rubbish. Why would you do that? This is faking it." And I think like, come on, guys. I mean, it's not necessarily faking it. It's creating a look that you like, which is a vintage
I disagree.
look.
I disagree, and I despise faux patina.
Why?
Because
Lume
I
has
think
to always
that it
be
is trying
white?
to. No, it does not have to be white.
So it can't
once
be.
Again, the new Oris. What was it called? The Oris Glow with turquoise lume. I'm very much okay with, because they chose a color and it wasn't yellowish. It wasn't brownish. It was turquoise. My wife's Rolex that has the purple lume or lilac or whatever, lavender, whatever they called it. The Milgauss with a multicolored lume. These are all okay with me.
Just not beige.
Not beige, because beige is once again trying to mimic the aging of tritium and the aging of radium.
No, it's not trying to mimic it. It's just making a beige indice.
But the reason they do this is to look like the older versions of the watch.
Maybe, but maybe we just like beige.
I highly doubt that. In some cases,
I feel it like, if you like the look, why not do that? I mean, you are wearing certain things that look like old style things as well.
And these are old style watches generally that are using it. So when you look at vintage, Panerai likes doing this a lot.
Inspired, yeah.
Yeah. There is some examples that I don't think it looks bad. For instance, in the Hamilton Khaki Mechanical, there's a lot of white. So they put just the lume plots as a beige.
Yeah. Which
essentially just differentiates the lume from the writing, which is cool. It works. But in some cases, it ruins a watch for me. So for instance, I'm a huge fan of the JLC Polaris. I would love a JLC Polaris with a black dial, but the black dial, they only give it with the beige patina. But on the blue variant, you get white luminous material. So in that case, I think it looks much more crisp, much more modern.
Even though the Polaris is not really trying to mimic an old watch necessarily.
We say this half and half because it is a reissue of an older watch, but that older watch was never a three-hander by itself. It was it was the Memovox.
But this is one of the things that is just the nice thing about the watch collecting world, or the watch enthusiast, is that we all have very strong opinions over the very minute details.
Yes, correct.
Of each watch.
So you don't mind faux patina?
I don't mind if it's a nice design choice.
I have
real patina, real faux patina on not faux
real
patina,
patina.
real patina on my Type 20 Breguet.
And what do you have faux patina on?
Don't even know. I think I might. Is it actually for patina? I'm not so sure.
On which one?
I don't know.
So, see, I don't think you.
Maybe on a Seiko. I don't know if some of the Seikos have
some of the Seikos do
brown.
Slightly brown. So I know the monsters, the newer monsters, have slightly brown.
I have an SPB 143 or 147. I'm not so sure. I think this is a bit. It's not white.
Yeah, but if we look at it, for instance, Rolex has never done faux patina. Seiko started doing faux patina. Some brands are vehemently opposed to it. Others embrace it. Omega has embraced it with a lot of their line.
Yeah, and also the James Bond version, right? They have faux patina.
Yes, the James Bond. But then again, they came out with the 60th edition, which did not have it, which I liked better. But once again, it's opinions, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's one of the things. And the other thing is we have to talk about Seiko as well, as from a Lume perspective, because they also do their own.
So before we get there, I just wanted to mention, to me, faux patina is the equivalent of having jeans with holes in it, right? You're trying to make it look a little bit vintagey or well used and worn in. So one of the things that people often mention is warmth, right? We want our dials to be warm.
Says the person who wears a jeans jacket.
Yes.
Is that a jacket? You can
it's
call
a
it a
shacket.
jacket.
It's a shacket, a shirt jacket.
Which is artificially aged and stonewashed.
No.
No.
This is me. This is all
So
me.
it was dark blue.
No, it wasn't dark. It was a single color. And I have since.
It's usually also pre-aged.
It is pre-aged in the sense that it's washed. It's washed, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But it's not.
Remember moonwash, stonewash, and all these
I
things
remember stonewash, acid wash,
yeah.
But yes, okay, I get your point there. That there is coloring in my denim.
I don't want to discourage that. I think it's totally fine not to like it. If somebody doesn't like
it's a 50-50 thing. If you ask
that's fine.
The watch community, I think 50-50.
Yeah, for sure.
But okay, go on with Seiko.
Yeah, Seiko has its own lume, like
Rolex.
Like Rolex, they have Chromalight, and Seiko has Lume Bright, their own mix, and it's also very strong. I must say, I think this is the one thing that I should have mentioned. I have a Sumo, Seiko Sumo, which is also extremely, extremely strong lume.
Is Grand Seiko using this as well?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure they would use Lume Bright. They don't have many watches that have
the
lume,
divers,
but some have. Yeah,
some have. So I don't know what they're using there. That I can't tell. If you guys want to comment and tell us what Grand Seiko is, there, are they using the Lume Bright?
I mean, it wouldn't make sense for them to. I mean, look, Seiko and Rolex are the two brands that come to mind who really took everything in-house as that they could, right? I mean, it's even the oils they used to
are proprietary.
To use in their movements to oil specific pinions and things are proprietary and made in-house by them. So it's a different level of integration.
My only Seiko that I've ever had was the SKX, which I think was predating the Lume Bright. So that one did not have Lume Bright at the time.
So but the thing is, why do you sometimes have watches that have lume but it's very weak? And it's probably also Luminova. How is this possible? Because they don't use much.
Mm-hmm. I'm assuming it costs a lot of money. It's not cheap. So you could save a good amount of money by applying it very thinly. Yeah.
And it's probably also, different grades of it, right? You can get the highest grade Luminova and you can get the lower grade Luminova.
It's like the ETA movements.
Correct.
Right? It's once again a Swiss maker. ETA, you can get top grade, you can get chronograph grade, you can get base grade.
Absolutely, yeah.
So
do we in general, you said you don't miss it if you don't have it.
No, I don't.
Right? Same for me.
I have my new Cartier, the Santos, has no lume on it whatsoever. I have not once looked at it and said, I wish it had lume.
Yeah. It's funny because I had it once that I was, I think, walking the dogs and the light switched off somehow, the street lights. And I checked my watch and I couldn't see anything. And I thought, and it was a watch that actually had lume, but it wasn't charged because I was,
sitting in the dark.
Yeah. So I was like, odd. I can't tell the time.
Yeah. So it does. Okay, of course this happens, but do I care enough?
No.
That's what it comes down to.
But I used to do that sometimes at night, just to use a UV lamp to just really charge up my
it's fun.
my
It's
watch and
really
then
good seeing.
walk through the darkness and say like, ooh, yeah,
It glows. So I have this place when I come in through my front door. It's generally, we have a light in the hallway right when you enter the front door, and it's never on. So you come in from the blazing sun.
Yeah.
And you walk through the door, you close the door, and it's dark. And every single time my Rolex glows like a flashlight. So it's super cool.
And next watch that is actually quite disappointing from a Lume perspective. It has a really nice way of which actually indices are colored. It's my Vacheron Constantin 56. Also not very intense, but also blue. And it has, instead of like the 12, 3, 9, and 6, it has the 2, the 10, the 8, and the 4 indices.
Yep.
Loomed, which looks pretty funky.
But this is, we can get into this. There's a lot of funky designs that have been done before. For instance, the Rolex Explorers, for a hot second, they did solid white gold 369. Yeah. So as with the Wimbledon, right? So you would have these weird offset number or Lume plots. But for me, in my Explorer one, the 369 are fully loomed. Yeah. And once again, it's a massive plot of Lume. So it glows extremely well.
Yeah, if you want to have your diver's watch, if you want to put the name diver on it, which I don't think actually Rolex does.
Nobody does anymore, I think.
Seiko does.
Still, they put divers?
Divers with an apostrophe, divers watch. And when you do that, then you have to put Lume plots on all indices, including the 3 o'clock, which is where Rolex usually has the Cyclops and no Lume plot. So
unless you have a no-date Submariner.
Then you do. Yeah, exactly. But so that's one of the things where you have Lume, divers watches have to have Lume on all.
Every 5 minutes.
Yeah, interval. Interesting. But Lume is an incredible innovation, so that we have something that
it's so incredible. We named our podcast after it.
Yeah, it glows in the dark, so that without any electricity,
the inner child in you comes out.
Yeah, absolutely.
To this day, my daughter thinks the coolest thing is glowing Lume. So 2 things my daughter likes about watches: rotating clicky bezels and glowing Lume. Oh. Which I think, to me, that's the 2 things I love the most as well. So it's one of these, as you know, your inner child does come out when you're rotating your bezel, and it makes all the clicks. It's fun.
Yeah, it's a lovely functionality, I think.
Yeah,
and it's very romantic because it's again fully analog, basically, no electricity, no technology used. Well, there is technology used, but it's not really. It's a paint.
Yeah. Well, then again, so it's glow in the dark. So it's the glow in the dark paint that people used to use on all kinds of things back in the 90s and 80s. It wasn't very strong, but it was, in essence, the same thing.
You can buy T-shirts with, the Rolex Lume plots on the front.
Yeah.
And then
similar to our logo,
and it glows in the dark as well. Yeah.
So
it's funny stuff.
Anyway, all right. So that's kind of what we wanted to talk about today. Lume plots. Once again, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, criticisms, let us know. You can leave us a DM on Instagram at Lume Plotters, or if you follow the link on the Instagram account, it will take you to our webpage. And on the webpage, there's a secondary link. And this allows us to do what, Ralph?
You can record a 90-second voice message for us that will then be sent to us, and we can then use it in our podcast to answer it. And you can hear your own message in the podcast itself.
Exactly. If we get a few of these, we can make a whole episode about
it's much nicer to actually have your voices on the podcast rather than reading out your messages. So just do it.
But if you don't want to do that, then once again, you can message us as well, and we will respond.
Absolutely.
So once again, thanks for listening.
Thank you very much.
See you next week.
Hear you soon. Bye.